During a meeting earlier today with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte at the White House just moments ago, President Trump addressed speculation amid reports stating that the U.S. might consider sending powerful long-range weapons to Ukraine.
The problem with the Tomahawk that a lot of people don't know, it'll take a minimum of 6 months, usually a year, to learn how to use them. They're highly complex. So the only way a Tomahawk is going to be shot is if we shot it, and we're not going to do that.
Joining us now to discuss NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. Secretary General, thanks for joining us. So President Trump also announced that he's canceled his meeting with Putin. He didn't have a good feeling about it. How do you feel your meeting went with the president?
It was a very good meeting. The president, since he came into office in February, in February, he started to have a dialogue with President Putin. And I think he was the only one who really could open up that channel of communication. He has always been in very close contact with President Zelensky. And what he said last Friday and Sunday, which is basically telling the two parties, the Russians and the Ukrainians, stop where you are, was exactly right. And we know that the Ukrainians want to play ball. And it seems with the Russians that a little bit of more pressure is needed to get them there. And I think what happened today, the sanctions on oil companies will help.
President Trump seemed to suggest, and I'm putting words in his mouth, but he seemed to suggest he's sick of Putin lying to him. I mean, that's in not so many words. That's what he said. He said something like, speaking of honesty, you talk to Putin and he says one thing and then it's not matched with action. This, of course, is what Putin has been doing for years in terms of people trying to end this war. I wonder if you think these current sanctions will be enough to ratchet up the pressure to convince Putin to stop, or even more sanctions are needed.
Well, maybe in itself it is important, but let's see what happens. But we have seen in the recent past, when it came to Alaska, Alaska happened when the president decided to put secondary tariffs on India. We saw the phone call last week that happened when the president started to contemplate, yes or no, sending Tomahawk missiles into Ukraine. So it means you can change Putin's calculus. You can change his way how he wants to end the war. And I think what we discussed today, and the president and I are in complete agreement on this, sustained pressure is needed. The Europeans doing more and more here, which is important. Today, the 19 sanction package by the Europeans being announced. So collectively, we have step by step get the Russians to the table. And of course, the Ukrainians who already said they want to sit down.
I certainly see how you can argue that President Trump has upped the pressure on Putin with the sanctions on India, the secondary sanctions, and also today, the oil sanctions. But where is the evidence that Putin has changed any of his behavior?
What we have seen is his going into Alaska, the phone call last Thursday, which hastily came about after the president announced that he was contemplating sending these Tomahawk long-range missiles to Ukraine for them to be used. Yes or no, not yet decided, but it was something he contemplated, he pondered to do. And you see therefore that when Putin feels under threat, that he feels things are moving in the wrong direction, that he then starts to react and act. When the president said Russia is a paper tiger, it was the Russians who said, no, we are not a paper tiger, we are a bear, which of course is silly because a bear is easily recognizable. You don't have to explain that to anyone. So all of this shows that they are not on a sure footing, the Russians, and the economy is not doing well.
Speaking of the Tomahawk missiles, you have said it's not NATO's place to litigate which weapons the U.S. sends to Ukraine. We did see these horrible images today of Russian strikes on a kindergarten. Ukrainian President Zelensky says that Putin is continuing these attacks because he's not feeling enough pressure. You heard President Trump suggest that Tomahawks are not on the table. It does seem that they might make a difference, though.
Well, again, it's up to individual countries, and let's never think that one specific weapon system will change the whole war. If it was that easy, then we would have ended it when the Germans sent the Leopards 2, when the Dutch and the Danes sent the F-16s. These systems are important. They will absolutely help to bring this war to an end. But in itself, one weapon system will never end it. And I think what the president explained today is that for the Tomahawk system, and he was completely right here, it takes months for anyone other than American soldiers to be trained on them. So it is not that if you decide today that Ukrainians can use them tomorrow.
President Trump said that he thinks Chinese President Xi Jinping, with whom the president's meeting next week, could have a, quote, big influence on Putin. Do you think roping Xi into these negotiations, who, of course, has his own not-so-secret ambitions to seize Taiwan, do you think that's a good idea?
Well, I think President Xi is a key enabler of the war effort through sanctions circumvention, through dual-use goods. The Chinese deliver into Ukraine. They work together with North Korea, with Iran, supporting the war effort. And to your point of Taiwan, we all know that the old thinking that you have the Euro-Atlantic, NATO, and then you have the Indo-Pacific and they are totally separate, that is really old thinking. We know that these theaters are more and more interconnected. So the President of the United States sitting down with the General Secretary of the Communist Party of China next week is important. And I'm absolutely convinced, and the President said so much in the presser this afternoon, that Russia and Ukraine will be on the table.
Obviously, President Trump's relationship with NATO has had its ups and downs. How are you feeling about the U.S.-NATO relationship right now?
I would argue it has never been better, thanks to President Trump, because I know from President Trump 45, when I was still Prime Minister, he was totally committed to NATO, but he irritated the fact that the Europeans and the Canadians were not paying the same as the Americans. At the NATO summit in The Hague, we collectively decided to move to 5%, including 3.5% spent on the core defense spending. That equalizes what the Europeans and Canada are doing with what the United States is spending. So since Eisenhower, so over 70 years, this has been a big pebble in the shoe, a big irritant in the relationship within NATO. President Trump, I think, had one of his biggest foreign policy successes at that NATO summit in The Hague, convincing the other 31 to collectively move to this 5%. And you see it today, the Europeans stepping up when it comes to weapons into Ukraine, buying from America, when it comes to coming together, discussing whatever they can do in terms of security assurances for Ukraine, post a ceasefire/a peace deal. This is all evidence. Europeans are stepping up under President Trump's leadership.
NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, thank you so much. Appreciate it, sir. We're just minutes away.
Thank you so much.
Been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the they're doing.